Merry Christmas 2020. This is Shogo Yahagi with another build. It's been 11 years since I've built a PC, and a lot has changed over the years. Let's get started. First, I chose the Cooler Master TD500 Mesh. A lot of YouTubers recommended this because of excellent airflow in the front. During this era, it's almost impossible to get the current CPU and GPU. So, as a temporary workaround, I got the Ryzen 5 3400G for $150. This has a built-in GPU inside the CPU, also known as an APU. I also got the Aorus NVMe Gen 4 SSD. 11 years ago, I talked about Western Digital's 10,000 RPM mechanical hard drive. But now, this is the era of not just solid state, but M.2 solid state. And it pretty much looks like RAM being stuck on the motherboard. But it's a hard drive and it's fast. And of course, we still got RAM. This is the Trident Z RGB DDR4, and it's at 4000, I believe. There you go. DDR4 4000. There goes the timing. This is crazy. Now it's a little risky because this was designed for faster CPUs, such as the Ryzen 5000. But this CPU, the Ryzen 5000 CPUs take advantage of this speed, but this is a slower CPU, so hopefully I don't face any incompatibility issues. And we have the Aorus X70 Aorus Elite Wi-Fi gaming motherboard. Now this doesn't have the latest Wi-Fi standard, but 802.11ac is still pretty fast, but the current fast speed is 802.11ax. And a higher end motherboard has that, but I saved maybe $100 by choosing this speed. Wi-Fi at 802.11ac is still pretty good, and of course there's gigabit built on the motherboard as well. So the reason why I chose this motherboard is it allows you an upgrade path. You can use an APU temporarily, and when Ryzen 5000 CPUs are available, I can eventually upgrade to that CPU. But I won't be doing that till spring. For the power supply, I chose Be Quiet. Straight power 11, 550 watts. Platinum. Don't get silver or gold, go for platinum. For any brand. And basically that's the top of the line type of power supplies with Japanese capacitors, and of course it's fully modular. What makes this power supply special is its fans. These fans are very quiet. So I took another risk. I found out later that GPUs nowadays require 600 watts or more, but I'm 50 watts below, and I've read some forums. It turns out that people have successfully used this for Nvidia's 3060 Ti, even if 600 watts is recommended. So hopefully that works out. And here it is, the Cooler Master TD500 Mesh. Now, I just took it out, and so this is brand new. And basically this is my workstation. I recommend that you work on hardwood floors if you have some instead of carpet, and you clear out the dining table. It makes a great temporary workstation. One thing I'm going to do here with the motherboard, I just opened up the box for the motherboard, and I'm going to work on the motherboard. So here I dropped the Ryzen CPU, into the socket. It's very similar to ZIF sockets, zero insertion force of the late 90s. You just align the triangle on the bottom left of the CPU to the triangle indicator, which you can no longer see because I've dropped it in already, which is also on the bottom left. And you literally just drop it in. You don't even have to touch or push on top of the CPU. Now we just rotate or fold down the arm back. There are two types of AM4 installations. Type A, where you basically clip directly onto these edges here in the middle. And then you have type B, where you need to remove the screws and then use the screws on the fan to screw into the holes. And what do I have? The Wraith CPU cooler that comes with some AMD processors is of type B, where the screws are already on. Therefore, on my motherboard, I need to remove these screws here, and the type B fan will be able to mount on via 4 screws instead of the middle clips of type A. So I was mistaken, and it turns out that I don't really have option 2. My heatsink and fan does not look like this, so it won't be using those plastic pieces. I have the Wraith cooler, which uses option 1. Option 1 requires that you remove those the 2 plastic pieces that are mounted on the motherboard, and the Wraith cooler will screw directly into the screw holes. Glad AMD has that all covered for you in their documentation for their AMD processor. So going back to the motherboard, let's go ahead and remove these pieces. The Wraith CPU cooler will screw directly into these 4 holes. So the Wraith cooler was not perfectly aligned with the holes on the motherboard. So what I did was started off diagonally, first with 1 point over here, and then 1 point there. And now so I basically crisscross, and those 2 are able to get in. But now this is still unaligned, but I'm gonna go ahead and go forward, and let's see what happens. So crisscrossing has seemed to help. This last screw, or second to the last, looks like we're gonna be okay. Notice that the AMD logo over here is upside down with the Aorus logo. So the reason why I did that was if we had the logo matching up and looking nice on this side, then the wire would be in the way of the RAM slots when we add or swap RAM in the future, because this will be inside the case and it will be not as easy to access. So that is why I have this upside down configuration, and this wire or the logo popping out or protruding will not block the way of the RAM. For your CPU fan, you need to look specifically on your motherboard's documentation, and you'll notice that these always come with 4 pins, and you basically need to find for your CPU fan which is the black cable, and that will be your ground. So over here in this diagram, it shows that where you see like this little stub on the top, and 1 starts from the right. So on the motherboard itself, we see here the CPU fan is the white 4 pins, and ground will be the pin on the extreme right. And you can see here The CPU underscore OPT, that would be the black one, and the CPU underscore fan will be the white one. Okay, the cable is connected. So as you can see, I sacrificed branding with the AMD logo stub not aligning correctly with the other branding of the motherboard. The Aorus on the left and AMD head to head. So inconsistent there. However, the advantage of sacrificing that, as you can see, the RAM slots will not be obstructed by the fan wire, CPU wire, and the AMD logo obstruction. So now these DIMM slots are nice and free with this configuration. It's your choice, really. So outside of the motherboard manual, there's a sort of a very brief instruction guide. And basically, it doesn't get into the details. You have to look at the details within the motherboard, we'll just say the motherboard manual book. But this sort of at least will tell you the order in which they recommend. So step 1, which we've done, install the CPU and fan. And step 2, they say to install the RAM. Step 3 is installing the motherboard into the case, but they made an assumption that you're not using M.2 and instead you're using SATA. So maybe these are sort of like outdated instructions. SSD M.2 is the new standard that everyone loves, and people are moving away from mechanical hard drives and even 3.5-inch SATA SSD to the new M.2 form factor. But that is not in this documentation. So for now, let's continue with step 2, RAM. So this is my choice of RAM, but I'm taking a risk here because this is DDR4 with these speeds. There you go. I have to turn off the... so I don't think... So these speeds need to... They're not really supported by the Ryzen CPU that I have. So I'm not so sure whether this machine will boot or whether I'll be able to get into the BIOS and have RAM errors or RAM not detected. What I'm hoping is that the motherboard will allow me to at least downgrade the speed to match the CPU so that in the future when I do upgrade to a Ryzen 5000, then I can change the speed and the timings to these default settings for DDR4 4000. So I'm hoping I can at least downgrade it to like DDR4 dash, I don't know, 3000 something, whatever the speed is needed for the older Ryzen 3 3400G. Let's find out. Okay, let's install some RAM. So for your specific motherboard, you definitely want to go check out your documentation to find out which slots you should install your two modules. And unlike the past where you're allowed to sort of install like one module, one lonely module, now you install them in pairs. And this is done for performance reasons. So we can either do 2 modules or 4 modules. So let's look at this chart over here. And we look at their recommendations. It says here, we recommend that you install them in the DDR4 underscore A2 and DDR4 underscore B2 sockets. Okay, so DDR4 underscore A2 and DDR4 underscore B2 sockets are located over here. Let's take a look at the motherboard manual. And there they are. It's the counting from the right, the first and third ones. DDR-B2, DDR-A2. DDR-A2, DDR-B2. So here's an example where I haven't pushed it in yet. So I just kind of like lightly put it on top, and then I'm going to push down firmly, and then those two open tabs will automatically snap and close, and you'll hear a click. Unfortunately, I can't hold the camera while doing this. Okay, so it's installed, but I want you to notice how the chip, see the chip right there, and then the plastic clip. Notice how that chip is locked in between the plastic chip. I'm sorry, the plastic clip. So that's the click that you hear when you push down and the tab automatically closes. Mechanically closes. And here we go as well. So that was an easy install. That's awesome. Let's move on. Step 2 is complete. Moving on to step 3. Nope, not yet. As I mentioned before, we need to install the NVMe M.2 SSD. Looks like RAM, but it's a hard drive. Let's take this out. Alrighty, so I slid that out. Let's open it for the first time. There it is. Wow, look at that. The heatsink is already on it. I'm not so sure whether to use that heatsink or the heatsink from the motherboard, and it's all from the same brand. So I really don't know what to do. I guess we'll just use this fancy copper thing. And what's this? More documentation inside the box. Let's go ahead and take that out and see if there's anything important we need to know. Always read your docs. So now we need to decide, which M.2 slot do we use? Do we use the first one, which is closer to the CPU and using the CPU bus, or do we use the second one, which is closer to the chipset for the chipset bus? And unfortunately, the documentation for both the motherboard and the M.2 drive does not explain that. So I checked on Reddit, and most PC builders use this one first. So that's what we're going to do. Now I have a heatsink already on there, but there's no hard drive there. We're going to remove this default heatsink, and we are going to add our new M.2 drive. So it turns out that these things at the M.2 SSD drive screws onto, at least on the edge, are called standoffs. And I unscrewed one of them, but it's just too long. As you can see, the sizes don't match. After doing some research on Reddit, I found that it basically needs to be moved to any of those other holes to match this size. However, some motherboards have these standoffs glued on. This one may or may not, but it doesn't matter because what are these? Now we know what these are for. Another standoff for a shorter drive. Let's get started. Okay, so I've installed the standoff at hole 80, but on the slot next to the CPU as recommended, and I'm using the new standoff there. It's fitting nicely. Because the heatsink was so heavy, as soon as I inserted the drive at an angle, it just dropped right in. Usually you'd see these without a heatsink in other YouTube videos, and they would sort of be floating on an angle, but because of the heavy heatsink, this puppy's gonna drop right in. It's just really heavy. All right, let's screw that in. So I was just about to drop it into the motherboard, and I couldn't remove the plastic, this plastic, so I had to take it back out, and let's remove the plastic. Okay, the motherboard has been dropped into the Cooler Master TD500 mesh. Actually, it's like that. And now it's just a matter of keeping these holes aligned. And I'm just going to go ahead and start screwing. Okay, so we have a lot of extra screws here. We're probably not going to use all of them. And this is for cable management. But anyway, we are now looking at the Cooler Master documentation. And we are on this step. Mounting the motherboard and screwing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of these bad boys. All right. I'm not so sure what that guy is. To be continued. Okay, so B, as you see in the diagram, B is that guy, and A is this guy, but A is nowhere to be found in any of the steps. So I've got no idea. We'll just continue with the instructions and install 9 B screws. Here we go. So I've been shuffling the board around just a little bit, and what you want to make sure is that these holes line up. What we're going to do is we're going to do the top right and the bottom left. So those look like they're lined up, and let's start from there. Okay, this is all done. And now we'll go here. Actually, no video card. So let's work on the power supply. So in preparation of installing the power supply, I had to tilt the tower right side up so it's coming along. This will have 3 RGB fans and a mesh front for air intake. And luckily, looks like everything's okay. Nothing's falling down. Everything's mounted properly. So far, so good. All right, let's get to that power supply. Oh, what a shame. I won't be able to show the Be Quiet logo through the glass panel that will cover all of this. As you can see, there's a hole for display purposes, and we won't be seeing this because the fan faces down. I think Be Quiet, the company, designed this so the logo faces when the power supply is mounted above, but that trend has sort of come and gone. So I'm surprised because this is a brand new power supply, a brand new product imported from Germany, and it's interesting how they were supporting the old format, but no worries. We are going to have it the other way around to get that fan to push out the hot air at the bottom. So what can I say? I was wrong. This is the reason why the logo is not showing, because this is more important, of course. And this is the obvious reason. This is correct. I was mistaken. My bad. Okay, The power supply is screwed on. The next step is to hook up the fans that are pre-installed into the PC case and hook that up to the motherboard right over here. Let's give that a shot. So it looks like even more confusion, but well, I do have ARGB, that's for sure. So this is really what I should be looking at, not this. So I was looking at what we have here. This looks like it. Looks just like the picture with the Cooler Master logo and split into 3. But then I noticed one of them was disconnected. And I also found this kind of laying around. So I have a feeling maybe it got disconnected by accident. I'm just going to guess and I'm going to connect them. I mean, they're just fans. What's the worst that can happen? Okay, so to review, we're going back to here again. We do have to connect this to the motherboard. And according to the Cooler Master documentation, it has SYS_fan. So that's a standardized name, the system fan. That's good to see because on my motherboard manual, it uses the same terminology. Sysfan 1 and 2 on number 4. Number 4? Number 4. Where's number 4? Ah, there's number 4. So this is where the system fan will plug into. Right next to number 10, which is an LED CPU. We're not using that. Lighting for CPU we don't use. So we are going to connect to number 4 on the motherboard. Cooler Master documentation for the PC case. Motherboard documentation for the Aorus Gigabyte motherboard. Okay, so this is day 2, and we are going to continue with the cabling. Now, before we get into cable management, let's go ahead and connect the wires from the PC case to the motherboard first. We're going to start off with the fans, connectors for the fans. For this motherboard, there's actually 2 different ones depending on your motherboard. So this was interesting. After reading documentation, I could not find anything on how to connect the Cooler Master fans to the Aorus Gigabyte motherboard. And I found some information from a forum, Reddit actually, that says to not use the Gigabyte connector and to instead use the ASRock Asus MSI connector and to connect it to D_LED connections, not the other fan connectors that I was looking at, which was documented in the manual. So I'm doing things that the manual didn't say to do because when I tried to follow the manual, it just wasn't working. So we're going to have to follow what the forum says because I have no choice. Alrighty, so here we go. This is a foolproof connection to D_LED2 because that's the one that it is easiest to connect to. Going back to the overview of the installation, we've completed the motherboard. We're skipping the GPU. We've already installed the power supply. We won't have any CD-ROM or mechanical hard drives. So we are now at step 7, where we connect the rest, the last of the connections. We got some started already, but we still need to do the power supply. And after that, a few little switches from the case. So first you find on your motherboard the directions, and it says you're going to need a 2 by 4 and a 2 by 12. So let's go look for that in our power supply manual. So this is the motherboard. Now here's the power supply. And basically I found these directions and verified, yes, there will be both a, well, they say the 20, 24, well, whatever. Yeah, that's here. Now we're going to go over the plugs and find the 2 cables that we'll need. With the fully modular power supply, we have a variety of options in this bundle. Here we see the 2x4 and 2x12. We'll ignore the others. Oops. I should have plugged the cables into the power supply before installing the power supply, but I'm too lazy to take the power supply out, so I will connect them as they are. I believe I have enough room. It'll be a little tight, but not too bad. So I have some setbacks. Unfortunately, I had to remove the power supply, and I'm going to remove part of the cage that is the right side. I notice I can't remove the left side, but I can remove the right side. I removed the mechanical hard drive holders, but this puppy is gonna go. It looks like I can remove this. I'm going to attempt to do that so that we have basically more space for the cables to flow through out of the bottom and through here. And another one will have to go through here. So, minor setback. But at least I believe it can be done. There's not much documentation, not unless I'm overlooking some documentation. I think these things are just designed to be flexible. And you know, that's one of the things with working with an open platform. You know, some combinations of hardware are not as easy as others. But this flexibility allows to make things happen. I removed that screw. Now let's remove this guy and let's pull out one side of the cage. Let's do it. I've rotated the PC so that the motherboard and CPU and everything is upside down. So, mistake number 1, make sure to remove the cage before you even get started. Make that mistake number 2, 3, 4, heck, I don't know. So doing things in the wrong order can totally make this a more complicated process. So again, this isn't really documented. Maybe more advanced PC builders already know this. I haven't built in 11 years. A lot has changed in 11 years. So I'm kind of going, I read as much documentation as I can, but even that is not enough. So let's remove this piece of the cage, which I'm glad that's even possible. Notice how these Phillips screws exist on the right, but not on the left. The left is permanent, and that one cannot be removed. But that's okay. The right side removed is all we need to create space for the power supply cables. Okay, now that we've removed all 4 screws, hopefully this right panel will slide out. Cool. And it does. Yes! Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, we've rotated the PC back up. No more cage in the way, at least on one side. Lots of space to work with now. And when I snapped in the cable, you'll definitely know that it's actually in, because you'll hear the click. And I wasn't getting that when I was finagling the cable with the power supply in the case, and the obstruction of the metal wall, which I removed. So definitely do your connections to your modular power supply first before screwing it into the case. The top one was easy, but this bottom one here was difficult. Sometimes I'm thinking maybe a partially modular power supply might even be better, because you'll always have this bottom one. I don't see any other, well, I guess modular has the advantage if you want custom cables, third-party cables, mix and match. But maybe I probably should have got a partially modular power supply. But it was very difficult to get the bottom two in. But you know it went in. Well, I heard, unlike the very loud snap, these guys lightly snapped in. So I was a little worried they're not in 100%. But then you can tell these clips are forming like a T formation, an L formation. So they did snap in. So with these two cables that need to be connected, I originally had this guy flopping around as I'm sort of pulling these cables and trying out different slots to see where's the best path. This big guy here, the main power connector is just gonna easily go through one of these guys. So the tricky one is the power for the CPU itself. This connection right here. And this seems to be the best place for this motherboard in this case, rather than going through here. So we gotta screw these guys back in so this guy doesn't keep flopping around as I'm tugging away at these cables. So here we go again. My first shot at cable management. I haven't done this before. Hopefully this isn't going to be a mistake, but I wanted to keep this guy aligned because it's important for him to reach his destination, which is pretty far. I'm not going to add any more of these cable management thingies yet, like those guys, until later. For now, I just want to get the basic connections going. So now I had to face the PC back down, and it should make it easier for me to plug in. This will involve some bending. Hopefully it'll go easy. I want to point out, see how the top has the notch on the top, that little rectangle above the two middle squares for the ATX 12 volt. That helps us. That tells us that this thing here is going to be on the top. So I've arranged it in the perfect position, and here we go. Okay, so both the left and right snapped in. The right snapped a lot louder than the left. I'm just a little worried about that, but I think we're okay. Push it in as hard as I can, and I did feel a snap kick in, but it was like it wasn't as strong as the snap on the right, and I'm just guessing because of the angle, but it should be locked in. And you can see those two plastic tabs, they are pretty much aligned, so I think we're okay. And now for the main power. Okay, let's get this bad boy in. The manual says the top is on the right side. See that rectangle right there on the middle right? That's going to be the top, basically. The way the cable is arranged right now, I'm gonna have to do some twisting. I don't think I have it arranged correctly, so I'm gonna have to twist and shimmy that in there. Here goes nothing. Okay, I got it in. That was pretty tough. At first I was thinking about moving the cable through here, but then it would have added a lot of tension with a sort of like an L bend. So I figured a loop would be a lot better, because this is here's it's pretty tight. I don't think you can bend too much here, but you can bend a lot better here. So that's why I chose this one. I think it would have been difficult if I went through this one. So hopefully I made the right choice. This piece was sort of split into two pieces, and they sort of had to land in at the same time. That was very difficult as well. I did get a click. I didn't get a loud click. I got a soft click. So I'm going to redo this. I pulled it out. Turns out that as I was basically looking at these other connectors, I kind of understand how it works now. Basically, there's a piece of plastic that basically says this needs to snap together in a way so that when you place it and when you insert this in, they'll all have even heights. And that was not the case with mine. They weren't aligned, and then so I didn't have even heights. So let's do this again. Second try, and it's perfect. So the trick is you need to align these multiple parts so that they're almost snapped together like Lego, and then you launch into the socket at the same time. And you're going to notice that it won't go in. It's difficult to get the left side in, which is the smaller piece, the smaller separate piece. So I pushed that a little bit more strength than the longer right side, and bam, it all locked in at the same time. And you hear a loud click. So, and you could tell it's perfectly aligned. It was very difficult to do, but I guess with practice, you'll get it. We've got about 4 connectors left. Let's go for that giant one, the USB. So for my motherboard, there are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 slots, and each of them support 2 ports. Now my case only comes with 2 ports in the front, and this is for the front USB, so I'll only be using one of them. And over here you can see 2 of them. I'll choose the one on the right, because that would be USB 301, and then the one on the left is USB 302. I think it probably doesn't matter, but just in case, I'll choose the one on the right, because it goes from right to left. There goes some older USB ports. We won't be using those. I've tried again, and I did hear a snap this time. What I did was I used less tension, pulled out more cable. I mean, it's not going to look nice. Maybe I'll pull some cable back in. Same with this guy too. But let's move on. So we have 3 connectors left. I'm really tired of reading all those dots and trying to figure out where they go. So maybe these are easy ones. I don't know, but I'm burned out. Tomorrow's Christmas. Everyone's asleep. So I'm going to have to push this out to tomorrow night. Guess I better clean up this mess so that we can actually have dinner here, or lunch. Oh, this kind of sucks that I didn't get to finish, but what can I do? Good night.
It's definitely better than Thanksgiving meal.
I know. Yum. A private and quiet Christmas between just us three. Oops, sorry. I just want to get this Christmas tree. Man, the focus is slow. Okay, here's my PC. All built. Took me a while to boot into video, but looks like everything's okay. And, oh, look at that. The BIOS of today just freaks me out. It is like badass. I mean, I'm just amazed just with the BIOS alone. The BIOS actually supports a mouse and with graphics. Wow. Anyway, it looks like my DDR4000s are working, but at a slower speed to match the CPU, and it happened automatically. Or shall I say automagically. Which, even though these speeds don't look so great, that's okay because my DDR4000s will kick up a notch the speed when I upgrade the CPU. The current 3400G is a temporary workaround. I will get my Ryzen 5000 and discrete Nvidia GPU during springtime. So anyway, these colors, at first I thought, oh no, red means bad. Oh no, but it turns out that even if my RAM is not on the supported list, looks like it's working fine. So I am so glad. And these actually turned out to be just default RGBA colors, which will be changed to white or maybe blue. Or even rainbow. We'll see. Let's continue. But this is pretty much most of the hardware install. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I think I'm remembering. I mean, it was 11 years ago, but I have a feeling the test we did 11 years ago was fixed because I tried the variable and it looked a little different. So here we go. It's variable time. Come on. There you go. Sorry about that focus. So these are really good frame rates for an APU. Ew, that's so gross. Uh-oh, getting down to 63 frames. Oh, okay, we hit 62 frames per second. Man, this is crazy. This game is not for kids, obviously. Grown-up gaming only. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh. Ooh. let's take a look at my PC while all this violence is going on. Alright, so the benchmark is hopefully ending soon. I cannot stand the blood and gore. Oh my god. Hey, let's just take another look at that. Oh yeah, RGBA or RGB. The Cooler Master TD500 mesh. The Ryzen 3400G and no GPU. This is really impressive. I mean, to have this type of technology packed into the CPU. Yeah, oh, here we go. Oh, we're still going? How long is this gonna be? You know, yeah, I did finish this game 11 years ago. But, you know, after not playing this for so many years and going back into it, you know, I haven't been gaming for so long. It's just been really busy over the past 10 years. And, a lot has changed. Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't stand this. How did I play this so many years ago? Oh man, this is bad. Oh, we dipped down. We went below 60 frames per second, briefly. Oh, dang. I mean, if PC gaming is like so crazy 11 years ago, I mean, I can't imagine the current games with the current GPU. So I wasn't able to get a discrete GPU because it's just impossible. You know, I wanted to get the 3060 Ti, Nvidia 3060 Ti. I would say that would be the best value at $399. That's as low as they go, if you're even lucky. But you can't get it unless you use a shopping bot. Okay, here we go. No, even more. Oh my gosh. I guess I have to press escape to end the test. I don't know how long this is gonna run, so let's do that. Frames per second on average. AMD Ryzen 5 3400G with Radeon Vega graphics. AMD Radeon RX Vega 11 at 1280 by 720 by 32-bit. DirectX 10. All right. That's it. I'll see you in the next 11 years. Just kidding. I'll be back as soon as I'm able to buy an Nvidia 3060 Ti discrete GPU. Until then, I'll see you later.